What is the real reason why all of a sudden Captain America can pick up Thor's hammer in Avengers Endgame? You might just be like me and wondering, why the heck is Steve Rogers all of a sudden able to pick up Mjolnir? Was he always worthy to pick up Mjolnir, or was he never worthy before? Well, the wait is finally over, my fellow film nerds, because by the end of this video, we will know the truth of what it takes in order to pick up Mjolnir. How's it going, film nerds? My name is Ryan Walsh, and Avengers Endgame, probably the biggest nerdgasm moment that every single comic book fan had within the movie is when Captain America finally was worthy to pick up Mjolnir. That is literally the point in the movie where I lost my mind and I could not believe what I was watching. It was absolutely fantastic. But why all of a sudden was Cap able to pick up Mjolnir in this movie? If you guys are a fan of the MCU, you probably can remember back to Age of Ultron when all of the Avengers took turns in trying to pick up Mjolnir, and Cap was that one character that actually was able to budge Mjolnir just a little bit, moved it just a tad, where Thor started to freak out a little bit. Even looking at Thor's reaction when he saw that Captain America had Mjolnir in Endgame, he himself even said, "I knew it," where he can call back to that one time in Age of Ultron where he was freaking out because he thought Captain America was going to actually pick up Mjolnir. But here's the big question about all of this. Why wasn't Steve Rogers able to pick up Thor's hammer in Age of Ultron when he was in Endgame? I mean, he budged the hammer, but he couldn't lift it? That doesn't really make any sense to me, because I feel like with Thor's hammer and how the MCU really perceives Mjolnir is that it's a black and white issue. You either can lift Mjolnir or you can't lift Mjolnir. There's no in between. So why wasn't Steve just able to lift the hammer all along? Well, first, I think we need to really dig into what it takes to actually lift Thor's hammer by looking at Norse mythology, comic books, and the MCU. Starting off with Norse mythology, which is what actually created the Norse gods and what Stan Lee based all of this stuff off of when he put it into his own Marvel comic books. And obviously there's going to be some similarities between both Norse mythology and the comic books, but there's honestly some giant differences that I was really shocked of when I first was getting all this information. And I'm not going to be going on about all of this Norse mythology and everything that has to do with Thor and all the background around that character. Instead, since this video is all about just Captain America picking up Thor's hammer, I think we really only need to talk about the abilities of Mjolnir. We don't really need to go into anything about Thor. So in Norse mythology, there are only 3 abilities that Thor's hammer actually has, which are that the hammer will never shatter, it will never miss its target, and it will always return to Thor. There's absolutely nothing about anybody being worthy enough to pick up the hammer. Honestly, anybody can go up to Thor's hammer and actually pick it up. It seems as though the only difference here is that Thor's the only one that can throw the hammer and it'll always come back to him. So if you're somebody that picks up the hammer and throws it, it's gonna go right back to Thor, it won't go back to you. Honestly, I was really shocked by this because I thought for sure that Norse mythology was the one to set all of that up, but it looks like Stan Lee and Marvel Comics were the ones to come up with that original idea. So I guess with that, we really have to transition into Marvel comic books because that's what's actually gonna give us the answer to what we wanna know. Oh, and side note, we're gonna be using the Marvel 616 universe for this in the comic books because that's the main Marvel universe. We're not going to be using any of the other alternate universes that happen within the comic books because then it can get way too complicated. And this brings us to when Thor first appeared in Journey into Mystery number 83 in 1962. This is the comic book that actually started the whole idea that only a few people are worthy enough to pick up Mjolnir. And it even has the phrase that Odin said in the original Thor movie on the side of the hammer.
Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor.
Since the movie and the comic books both share the exact same phrase that's on Thor's hammer, I think it's safe to say that both mediums really have the same rules regarding the hammer. And when really analyzing this phrase on the hammer, it doesn't tell us exactly what makes somebody worthy of the hammer. It just says if you're worthy, you'll possess the power of Thor. So it looks like we're gonna have to dig a little bit deeper in the comic books to really find out what exactly do they mean when they say somebody is worthy and somebody is not worthy. What are they really basing that off of? And honestly, I think the best way to really find out what that whole word worthy means is to go back to the origin of Mjolnir within the comic books. Looking at where it originated from, it was made by King Eitri and the dwarves by the command of Odin, which is the exact same thing that happened within the movies. Also, the hammer is made out of Uru metal, which is one of the strongest metals in the entire Marvel universe other than adamantium, which makes up Wolverine's skeleton, and vibranium, which makes up Captain America's shield and all of Wakanda. sun. And the hammer was forged in the heart of a dying star. Basically the same thing that we got to see in Infinity War when King Eitri and Thor were making Stormbreaker. However, something really funny happened when I was looking through the origin of the hammer, and that's that when the hammer's made, Uru metal and just being forged in the heart of a dying star doesn't give it that enchantment that makes it impossible for most people to pick up the hammer. Actually, the person that gave the enchantment for the hammer was Odin himself. So I think it's safe to say in order to be worthy of the hammer, you have to be worthy in Odin's eyes, which makes a lot of sense because worthy can be extremely subjective, because one person can think someone is worthy and then someone can think that person isn't worthy. It's extremely subjective, so knowing that it comes from Odin makes a lot more sense. But to be honest with you, that still doesn't really give us a lot to go off on. We still can't tell whether Odin thinks one person is worthy and another isn't. We have no idea what he really thinks. So instead, I found this issue that gives us the exact explanation of what it actually means to be worthy in Odin's eyes, which is in the Mighty Thor number 390, and this is actually the first issue that debuted Captain America being able to pick up Thor's hammer. It was said that only a person that is pure of heart and noble of mind is someone that is able to pick up Mjolnir. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense because who else is more pure of heart and noble of mind other than Captain America? In my opinion, I'd make a huge argument to say that Captain America is probably more worthy than Thor is of the hammer, but honestly, that's for another video. So now that we figured out what it means to be worthy, going back to that scene in Age of Ultron, it still doesn't make sense of why Captain America couldn't pick up Thor's hammer. Because if somebody is pure of heart and noble of mind, that isn't something you can just turn off and on. That's always going to be with that person. But still, within that scene, Cap couldn't lift the hammer, so maybe the movie's got it wrong, or maybe there's just something that we're missing from this. Honestly, this really got me thinking about the original Thor movie. When we look at Thor during the middle of the movie, he wasn't able to pick up the hammer either, even though at the beginning and the end of the movie, he was. And for those who haven't gone back and actually watched the original Thor movie in a long time, here's a brief recap of the movie. Thor basically got the hammer taken away by Odin because he was trying to wage war against the frost giants. Then Odin decided to banish Thor to Earth, and he actually stuck Mjolnir on there, probably thinking that, oh yeah, Thor's probably gonna find his way, and then he's gonna be worthy of Mjolnir once again. But then once Thor finds out that Mjolnir is actually on Earth with him, he goes to find it. He has to go through a bunch of these shield guys in order to get the hammer. Once he does, he isn't able to pick up the hammer because he's just not worthy anymore. But to be honest with you, I don't think Thor in this movie isn't able to pick up the hammer again because he isn't pure of heart or noble of mind. It's just in the eyes of Odin, he doesn't see Thor as worthy. So I think we can really just add that not only is it pure of heart and noble of mind, but Odin's perspective on that individual person definitely comes into play here. And I think it's also important to mention that before Odin threw the hammer back into the Bifrost so it would go to Earth, he actually put the enchantment on the hammer again. He just wanted to ensure that the person picking up the hammer was going to be worthy. And once again, was obviously just going to be Thor because he literally put the hammer in the exact same state that Thor was in New Mexico. So obviously Odin was like, yeah, he's gonna be worthy by the end of this movie. But cut to the end of the movie, when Thor was about to die, Mjolnir flies to him and he's able to pick up the hammer once again and become the god Thor. The reason Thor was able to lift the hammer again wasn't just because Thor was literally about to die. Instead, it was a combination between both him about to die, but also the sacrifice he made to save all those people in that town. A sacrifice only someone pure of heart and noble of mind would make. Also, Odin probably knew that Loki was literally about to destroy an entire planet full of frost giants, so he's like, alright, I'm in the Odin sleep, so I need Thor to actually do something. But now looking at Captain America again, and we just keep reiterating this, it just seems like Cap would be worthy at this point. It makes no sense that he wouldn't be in Age of Ultron. Because if we just look back at Captain America's old movies like the first Avenger, he sacrificed himself in order to save millions of people. Now, I did want to address this one thing that did come out while I was editing this video. The Russo brothers themselves, the directors of Endgame, did come out and they did comment on this, and they said that in their eyes, Captain America was always worthy of the hammer. And in Age of Ultron, when it looked like Captain America was struggling to pick up Thor's hammer, instead he could pick it up the entire time, and he just chose not to because he didn't want to make Thor feel bad. Honestly, when I look at that entire quote, that sounds really stupid in my opinion. Now, I love the Russo brothers, and before all of these Marvel fans comment below and say, hey, you don't know what you're talking about, the Russo brothers know way more than you. You're totally right, they know way more than me. But the thing is, they can't say exactly what Josh Whedon, the director of Age of Ultron, intended for that scene because they didn't direct the movie. This is just their opinion, it's in their eyes. So I don't think that we can really count this at all because this just doesn't make any sense at all. But let's just keep going. But obviously there's just something holding him back. And I do want to address the one theory that you might be thinking of right now. And that's just the only thing holding him back is actually that Captain America didn't tell Tony Stark that the Winter Soldier, Bucky, murdered his parents. And I definitely kept this in mind when making this video, and I went down the rabbit hole with this theory, and it just didn't really pan out because it just didn't make any sense. Because Steve may have done something selfish by sparing himself the pain of telling Tony that his best friend murdered Tony Stark's parents and the implications that would have had within the Avengers. And looking at it that side, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. He's not going to be worthy. But honestly, I think we're really just looking at it from one perspective, Tony's perspective. We're not looking at it from Captain America's perspective either. Because by not telling Tony Stark that Bucky killed his parents, Tony Stark then wouldn't have gone ballistic and tried to kill Bucky. And Steve knew that Bucky was being mind controlled by Hydra when all this happened. So Steve probably thought to himself, hey, I think it's just a better idea that Tony thinks that his parents died by a car accident and that's all that happened, instead of just seeing that, yeah, Bucky actually killed your parents. One, it would have kept the Avengers together, but also it would have kept everybody alive, which makes a lot of sense. So I think there's just two sides to that argument, and we can't really say that that's the deciding factor whether Captain America was worthy or not. Instead, I think we're really just missing the big picture here, and we're just not seeing where this scene kind of takes place and what he's trying to do. He's just trying to do it for a laugh. He's trying to pick up the hammer to see if he's worthy for a gag at a party. He's not actually in any danger. He doesn't need the hammer right now. And if we can really just say one thing about all of the movies, it seems as though if you're going to be proving that you're worthy and you need to pick up the hammer, it's usually in that last second situation, just like the original Thor movie. They have to basically just be putting their lives on the line for somebody else. And that's exactly why Steve was able to pick up Mjolnir in Endgame, because he was trying to save Thor from Thanos. Thanos was literally about to take Stormbreaker and put it through Thor's chest, and this was just one of those last second situations where Steve was going to put his life on the line to save Thor. And that's why, looking back at that scene in Age of Ultron, Steve definitely had a pure of heart and noble of mind, but he just wasn't put in that situation where he needed to sacrifice himself in order to save somebody else. And the hammer just lifting a little bit or budging just told Cap and Thor that he's worthy, he has the stuff to lift the hammer, but it's just not the right time right now. Which I also found another alternate universe comic book that actually said this as well, where Thor told Superman in the JLA/Avengers crossover when Superman couldn't lift the hammer after he already did in battle. Thor told Superman that a very few worthies have been allowed to overcome the spell in desperate hours, proving that when Captain America was lifting the hammer in Endgame, that the only reason he was able to do it was because he needed to do it in that dire situation. Oh, and also for all those people out there saying that Captain America wouldn't be able to use lightning if he was just able to pick up the hammer, that's just Thor's power? Well, why don't you read the saying on the hammer again that was put in the first Thor movie? It doesn't say the wielder will possess the power of the hammer. Instead, it says the wielder will possess the power of Thor, which Thor has the ability to conjure thunder and lightning. So obviously, Captain America can use lightning in that situation. But of course, if you enjoyed this theory and you want more like it, definitely check out the video right here or become part of the film nerd community and subscribe down below. But thank you all very much for watching, and as always, my friends, embrace your nerdy side. Bye-bye.